Hi there! So, as you may know already, we are quite the multicultural bunch, and between the four of us, we speak a few languages. So, I thought it would be interesting to talk about foreign languages and languages we speak all together. And maybe you would like to share your experiences of learning languages as well.
Let's start the conversation with what languages do we speak?
Well, I speak English and a bit of German. That's it.
Okay, I would consider, English and French, they're my mother tongues, or my mother and father tongue, I don't know. And then German, and I would count Spanish, even though I'm not, my abilities have gone downhill, but I would still be able to have a conversation.
Yeah, so my mother and father tongue, both Hungarian, and then I would add English and German as well, and also very hesitant about Spanish. I could order food, that counts, and I understand a lot of it, but not sure about speaking.
So I guess coming from Malaysia, I'm a little bit more of a unique culture there. Being a Chinese Malaysian, I speak Mandarin Chinese. I also speak English, and being a Malaysian, I also speak Malay. Living in Kuala Lumpur, most Chinese knows how to speak Cantonese. And my actual mother and father tongue is a Chinese language called Hokkien. And you might think, okay, Mandarin Chinese, Cantonese, and Hokkien, they're all Chinese languages, but they are very different from each other. There are different amount of tones, different amount of sounds that are like permissible in the language. They're not mutually intelligible at all. I speak Japanese. I'm pretty sure I could still speak it to save my life right now, even though I don't use it much anymore.
That's a good way to test your knowledge of
Yeah,
language.
Yes,
Can I save myself?
and then see what happens.
Exactly. I can speak German. I don't use it as often here, although we're all in Germany, but I can speak it. I would be very hesitant to put Korean in this list because I was able to speak it quite fluently when I first learned it, but now I think it's reduced to only being able to read the characters at this point and also understand some lines in Korean dramas, but maybe just some basic introductions at this point. I haven't been able to use it at all actually for the years I've been in Germany, so yeah. So the next question would be, when did you first start learning your first foreign language?
That's a good question if you mean formal education or not. Because my grandma was half French, so when we would go to France, we would speak a little bit of French, but obviously my French was very, very bad. But in school, my first foreign language was German. And I started learning that when I started secondary school, so that would be when I was 11, 12 is when I started.
So it's pretty similar for me actually, because my first exposure ever to a foreign language was actually with Romanian, that I started learning at the age of 4, but maybe finished at the age of 5. We learned the basics. It was my brother and my sister. We had a little notebook and we wrote the colours, the numbers. We learned a few things, but I can't remember anything right now apart from that. So that disappeared quite quickly. And then when I learned my first sort of foreign language as part of the formal education, it was also German, and also in secondary school at the age of 11, 12.
I don't think I had sort of informal exposure to foreign languages. I started learning English in school, I think that was like year 3, so I was like 8 or 9 or something like that. Yeah, and that went on later as well. But I think we started it like 1 lesson a week in year 3, and then it was more and more every year.
Yeah, makes sense.
You all started quite young, so my first, my first foreign language was Japanese. I learned it, I was quite sure, when I was 16 or 17.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was really interested in, of course, anime, and I don't like watching dubbed anime, so then I watched it in Japanese and with English subtitles, and I was like, I want to learn the language. So of course I went to classes. That, funnily, I couldn't speak then. Like, I just know those rules, I know those words, and I actually only actively learned it again, like continued the education and use it when I was working in kind of like a Japanese company, sort of, in Malaysia. But that definitely is the first one. The last one would have been German. Informally Hungarian. I think that's the first language that I mean, if you don't count all those other Chinese languages in Malaysia, because we have so many Chinese languages in Malaysia spoken by different,
But it's really interesting, like how we started learning sort of like 9, 10, 11, because we in school are only exposed to one language. Otherwise, like all the other subjects are taught in the one language.
Although it wasn't
And
the case
for you, that's not the case, right?
No, which is really interesting. I mean, if you watch the 5 things you may not know about Malaysia, you might know that we have the very weird education system where it exists, each school exists in different languages.
But my school, languages weren't important, and so especially like when you got to after the first 3 years, the next time you could choose if you wanted to do PE, sports, or
languages. Oh, no.
Okay.
In most schools, we don't have language electives, so it's either we call it
You just have it.
So we call it POL, which is People's Own Language. So which means like if I'm in a Malay high school, I could learn Mandarin, take Mandarin classes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's about it. We don't. Most schools don't have a lot of like language electives. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. What do you call like the foreign? What do you call the foreign languages? You just said
German.
The
Yeah.
actual
Because
Yeah,
language.
us too.
You too? Because we called it, so there was LV1, LV2, LV3, LV4, etc.
But that's because you
And
had
LV
options and you had you didn't have options, it was that one.
It was not for the options, it's like LV1 means a lively language 1, so it's your first foreign language. Your second foreign language is lively language 2.
Oh, like languages that are still spoken, so not like
yes,
Latin.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so like
you
living
could have,
languages.
you
Living
could have,
languages,
Not dead languages.
Yeah, exactly. You could have like your first LV1 could be, Spanish, German, English, but you could have Latin, but that one wouldn't count as a.
Okay,
LV,
that's a living
yeah.
language.
People would ask you, what is your LV1,
Great.
what is your LV2?
Oh, interesting.
So it means what is your first foreign language, what is your second foreign language?
Okay. All right. So I mean, we all learned languages, and what did we struggle with the most then?
The grammar. Because German, I think the grammar is hard and it's very different to English. And obviously, like in English, we don't learn as much of the grammar as you do in a foreign language. So everything's new because you
just speak it.
Yeah.
I would also say the grammar, but actually the one thing that confused me the most when learning a foreign language was when I picked up Spanish, but I had learnt Latin the year before, and I had just dropped Latin and I just started, so there was just a summer in between both. Then I started Spanish and I got so confused with the verbs, and I think my first Spanish test I got like, I don't know, I got a very low grade anyway. I don't remember what my grade was, but I was like, oh my gosh, how could I do so badly at languages? I thought I was talented. I mean, because I was always quite good at German, and then I had the Spanish test, and I thought, oh no, I just completely mixed up Latin and Spanish. Yeah, so that I found was quite difficult. And in German, I think the grammar points that I found particularly difficult were to do with the articles and the genitive
And the cases.
Yeah, cases and genitive, I think that's where it gets confusing,
I think
because you have
the
to
genitive
remember
is
all the-
actually easier for me than the other
Okay.
cases because I'm like, it's just possession.
That's
It's
true.
not just possession.
I mean, but it's
though.
mostly.
Yeah, mostly possession.
It's mostly
yeah.
possession, so
You
like
can
kind
understand
of get
when
away
Yeah.
with
you're
it.
using it. Yes.
But the other ones I'm confused with, like when do you use which and
Yes.
So for me, I think the first difficult thing that I couldn't really wrap my mind around was that there are these verbs in Spanish and in German as well that sort of reflect back, like these reflective
reflexive.
words. Like, oh my god, I just couldn't understand it because in Hungarian
You
they
have
don't
that.
exist. Like
We don't
in
have it.
English, it doesn't exist. And like I dressed I dressed myself up. And like I woke up. No, I woke myself up. Like, why do you need to include yourself in this phrase? Like it just doesn't make sense. And it took me such a long time to understand when you have to put.
But don't you say I look at
on me.
myself? I look at myself in the mirror.
But that's different.
But that's different because
Because
you're actually
there is-
yourself.
yeah.
You see it.
yeah.
The
Yeah, okay, I
myself.
see what you mean.
You're like you're not like you could wake someone else up, but you wake up. You don't have to wake
Yeah,
yourself up.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that was very, very difficult to understand. And then the second thing that was difficult was I learned Spanish in school in Hungary, and then I learned it at uni in England as well.
Ah.
In like the evening, I took classes with a friend, and it was really, really difficult to have a teacher explain something in English that I
Yeah.
already heard in Hungarian
Yeah.
talking about Spanish, and I got really bad headaches. I'm not kidding. I had to take a pill before the class for the first like 3-4 weeks because my head was just exploding. And
It was opening all the
different
drawers.
languages. It's just like, so which language is supposed to come out of my mouth the next time I open it? It was really, really difficult. So, but I didn't have that with German. Funny enough, when we started learning German here, because our teacher only spoke German in the
Yes.
class, which was
Ah.
amazing.
Amazing,
She
yes.
didn't
So you
speak a
didn't have
word
that
in
at school?
English.
In school, the teacher was
No,
speaking
they were
Hungarian.
speaking
and
Hungarian,
and in
talking
the UK
about
they
the
were
rules in
speaking
Spanish.
English. Yeah.
That one teacher. The
But I
other
think it's
teacher
interesting.
didn't.
But in England, like when you learn in school, English is obviously the base language, and
Yeah.
then you have very little German input in general. I
Oh,
think.
really?
Mhm.
Because
Yes.
I've only
That's
had
why,
it.
like, the speaking
I've
was
only
so
ever had it
difficult for
where the teacher only speaks in the language.
Okay, since I started off with Japanese, I'll start with that. I think Japanese, one of the things that I found difficult at first, because I was quite young when I learned it, were something called particles.
Particles.
Yeah, so
Right.
what it does is that it kind of tells you who the actor is
Okay.
and what the actor is doing.
And it goes at the front or at the back of the
It goes between words.
Oh.
So, and for German, one of the, I mean, of course, Daddy Das is difficult.
I let that go years
Yes,
ago.
me too, me too. And for me, one of the most difficult thing is just the tiny differences. I think it exists in English, but it's just much more obvious in English. It's the tiny differences between verbs when you add a prefix to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for
Yes,
example,
yes.
brennen versus verbrennen.
Yeah.
I mean,
Changes the meaning.
exactly,
completely.
but it's still about burning.
Yeah.
But one is just burning, and one is basically burned down or burnt out, and it's like completing a burning action. It's like,
yes.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest struggles for me when speaking German is definitely formulating the sentence on the go,
Yeah, the word order.
because
Ugh.
I'm
You
trying.
need to
Definitely
think about
practice,
keep in mind what
practice,
you're going to say
yes.
at this end before. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
trying really hard to not translate sentences from
Yeah.
English in my mind
That
into
doesn't
German.
work.
It doesn't help.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, but I mean, the more you practice it, the easier
Yeah.
it gets.
Yeah, I
right?
guess so too.
So that's definitely a good point with every single language.
And I think every time
practice.
you have a new language where there's a new concept, your brain has to like rewire
Connect
it,
it
Yes.
with
Build like
something.
open
schemata.
to like a new, yeah, it's like a whole new world. You're like, oh wow, this is different.
Yeah, I think emergence is really important for learning
Mhm.
language, which is why being in Germany helps.
Yeah, that's
supposedly, you first have to speak it.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you have to get to a point where you feel comfortable speaking, because
Yes.
I think it took me quite a long time to get to that point to speak German with my native German colleagues, for example. And because I didn't feel like I could hold up a whole conversation in German if we started, and then it's really embarrassing, like, oh, how do you say that? How do you say that? But now I'm just either A, inserting a word in English that I
Same.
don't know, B,
That's what
I have
Germans
to-
do anyways.
That's what
how,
Germans do, yeah.
how do you say this in German? Like,
Yes.
lawnmower. How would I know how to say
Yeah.
lawnmower in German?
Yeah.
I
It's a very
heard
difficult
it
word, though.
before.
But
Yeah.
luckily, like, at least we can always put English in because most people understand.
Yeah,
Yes.
they
That's
do.
true.
Yeah.
That's true. You can do that with any
And
language.
Danglish is definitely a thing.
It is.
So that's Deutsch English.
Denglish.
I have some marvelous examples that I share with my cousin, and we love to laugh about it in the morning. Oh, this is amazing. I should write a book.
Yes, there's definitely enough to write a book.
Yeah, that's it.
Merci d'avoir regardé notre vidéo. Nous espérons que cela vous ait plu.
Si c'est le cas, pensez à liker, commenter et à partager la vidéo avec votre famille et vos amis.
Vous souhaitez en voir davantage? Allez jeter un coup d'œil à notre playlist.
N'oubliez pas de vous abonner à notre chaîne et à cliquer sur la petite cloche pour recevoir des notifications de nos vidéos à venir.